The big debt restructure. Can Ghana bear the pain? It's been announced already and it has taken the country by storm. There's so much still left unexplained. And tonight we'll try and help with that, asking the questions that some of you have sent of the Finance Ministry. And then subsequently, this is a two-part show. In the second part, we'll get to hear from the stakeholders who may be affected by this, how they're also responding to this. And hopefully the explanations that we'll get can offer them some clarity, and you as well. You don't want to go anywhere. This affects everybody. And so let's get to it. The key question we are asking tonight, can Ghana bear the pain? And what really is the alternative if this pain is too much to bear? We'll get to that pretty shortly. But let's start with the basics. The domestic bonds have been restructured, proposed. This is what government is proposing to do with the restructuring approach to the domestic bond. Government is yet to tell us what they want to do, particularly with the external debt restructuring. We'll come to that and see what the plans are for this. And then you look at the proposed structure when it comes to the debt exchange program. This is a voluntary debt exchange program. I'll explain what that is pretty shortly, but let's quickly go through what the finance minister said today, yesterday, then elaborated today. So domestic bond holders will have to exchange their instruments for new ones. So what it is simply is, you may currently be holding a government bond, let's say a 2-year bond, that is expected to mature next year. Or let's say matures, let's say a 5-year bond that you bought last year, that will mature, say, in 2026. Government says, is as far as you are an institutional bond holder, then that debt is going to be restructured. Government wants to buy that, take that debt off you, you exchange that and give you a new one. That new debt, that new bond that government will give to you will no longer mature in 2024 or 2023 or 2025. They've extended the maturity date. So the first maturity that you will find will be 2027, and the second will be 2029, 2023, and 2037, right? So that is an exchange. So you're holding a bond, give that to me, and I'll give you a new bond with different terms. In essence, that's simply what it is. And the terms begin with the dates of maturity, so they're extending the maturity. But then also, they're also breaking down for us the interest that you'll be getting in the new bonds that you would get once you exchange what you're currently holding. In 2023, if you were expecting the biannual, as we normally see with bonds, payment of interest, the new ones that you get zero interest on the bond that you get from government when you take in your current existing bonds. And then in 2024, the second year, you'll get 5% interest. And then 2025, you'll get 10% interest onto maturity. So that is, in essence, the breakdown of what the government is offering you. And also, they're giving us the maturity, just the interest rate calculations over the period. So 17%, okay, with the short bonds, 17% again. And this is how they divided this over time. And we have 25%, and then you have 41%. And so just bear that in mind once. This is voluntary. So they'll have to voluntarily join this and offer to exchange this. The question is, if it's voluntary and I decide not to do it, then what happens? And the Deputy Finance Minister will help us with that explanation, because this is voluntary. It is not compulsory. The Finance Minister was clear, voluntary debt exchange. You're holding debt, we can't pay, so please bring that debt, bring that bond, and then we'll give you a new one spread over a longer period of time. We're hoping that by that time, of course, will give us some space to breathe, and then we can raise the funds for you to pay. So this is the finance minister breaking it down even further. But there are exemptions to this, and I can't emphasize these exemptions enough. And you see there's a bit of, I don't want to call it panic, but there's concern because people don't understand the entire structure of what has been announced. Everybody thought then your money, no matter what it is, regardless of the type of investment, then it's affected. No, not every investment is affected. If you are a treasury bill holder, you are completely exempted. So your treasury bills will mature 90 days, whatever it is, will mature as was originally told you in your arrangement, and you get full value for it when it matures. So you're not affected. You also not get a haircut on your principal. So if I put in 100 cedis to buy that bond or to buy that treasury bill, you would when it matures, you will get your 100 cedis plus all the interest that you had put in. That is if you're an individual bondholder. And that for me is a key thing, the individual bondholders. I know the confusion had been since yesterday for many people is what constitutes an individual bond and what constitutes an institutional bond. We'll get the Deputy Finance Minister to help us explain that and break it down for you. That's all we'll be doing today. Today is just to help you understand what has happened with the announcement. So individual bondholders will not be affected. The question I have, like, what about mutual funds? How is government treating that under this? Okay, so we'll get some clarity for you. But those are the exceptions as far as the Finance Ministry's announcement is concerned. Something that I, myself and my research team decided to do is try and do our own calculations as to how much exactly will this current debt treatment, what would it mean for our debt stock? Because remember, the Finance Minister says the target, the objective for this is to eventually reduce our debt to GDP ratio to 55%. So the question to ask yourself is, this arrangement that I've just gone through for you, what does it do to our debt stock and what does it leave that we will need to bridge? So let's try and do the analysis, and the Deputy Minister will help us, because this is based on our own permutations, right? Based on what we know in the budget, etc. So maybe will help us maybe nail it a bit more specific, because that is really the point. If we cannot achieve the big drop in our debt stock based on the arrangement that we've announced and the pain that we've imposed, and there's no point in doing it. The Finance Minister announced today that this particular domestic debt treatment will knock off estimated 137 billion cedis off our debt stock. Okay. Now, percentage of this then, of our domestic debt, will be 70.02% if you look at the budget. If you take away the 137 from the total domestic, stock that we have, the percentage that we'll be gaining, if you like, let me put it that way, will be 70%. But then if you do it against our total public debt, we would have brought our debt down just if this is successful. Because remember, this is voluntary. So if everybody buys into it and it works according to plan over the period, we would have knocked off as much as 29.3% of our debt just by doing this arrangement. That's what we believe, based on the calculations we've had. So it doesn't get you to 55%, but it's a very good start indeed. And if you go to the next thing that then helps you understand what I'm talking about, if you look at the budget, you'll find that our domestic debt is 195 billion cedis, and that's the calculations that we've done, right? The total debt stock, according to the budget, is 467.37 billion. That's the big picture. We want to reduce this significantly to the point where, in percentage terms, it is 55% to GDP. To do this, we've started by dealing with this. So we are reducing this particular, bar that you see here. We want to reduce it significantly to a point where it will help in the overall picture, bring us down to 55%. But what we've done with knocking off what I've been explaining here, 0% next year, 5% in the 2014, 2024, and 10% in 2025, all that, if this goes according to plan and everybody signs onto it, we will reduce our debt by 29%. So that is significant. And then, if you now do the calculation, as in a percentage of our total debt to GDP, remember the Finance Minister also says something, that now if you look at our total debt stock to GDP, if you include, the debt owed by state institutions, etc., all to it, you are above 100% to GDP. So we're using what the World Bank had projected. The finance minister said it, but we don't know exactly the figure. We use the World Bank and projected. So just above 100%, 100% to GDP. So we believe the total amount of bonds to exchange to achieve the 55% GDP will amount to 212 billion cedis. So we need to now find a way out of our total debt stock to reduce it by this amount. So that is huge. And remember that what we are already doing, what the finance minister announced, as I said, is going to help us take off 137 billion. That will leave you, in essence, 75 billion. I mean, but there are questions here that we need to answer that we haven't figured out, because which interest rate are you using will be a key question, right? We don't presume to know, because this is a moving part, right? It's a constantly moving part. Even when you use the 467 billion, that was based on the interest rate in September. That has changed quite significantly. So, although we are giving you a picture, this is not very accurate in terms of what the reality will be as and when we are ready. We believe this is going to be significantly more, but at least it helps you see the picture we are trying to paint for you, how much we are achieving with the current arrangement that has been announced. And then the key question is the breakdown. And that is why you heard today the pension funds, the banks, the insurers, all of them, beginning to have meetings to try and see how this will affect them. And the government met them, I believe, on Friday. Because if you look at the banking sector exposure, the banking system holds as much as 51.2%. That is 93 billion of government bonds. So that's significant. This is according to the Finance Ministry's own debt report of 2021. And then you have the non-banking sector, 32%, and then you have the foreign sector, 16%. So the exposure of the banks is significant. And then you go down, they do a further breakdown of this. You get the banking sector alone. The Bank of Ghana also holds the debt. A significant part of the debt, 19% of this. So the key question then becomes, how will the debt exchange affect these banks, considering how exposed they are to these bonds? And what is government's plan to help them avoid becoming insolvent? And we've had an announcement that there's this financial stability fund that has been established, because government is looking at these numbers and thinking, if you don't take time and be cautious in what you're doing and provide them some help, some of these banks may have a challenge with liquidity. Some of them may face the possibility of, going broke. And that is why government is stepping in there. Not only these banks, right? You also have the deposit money banks, and then you have institutions like insurance companies. Insurance companies are holding just above a billion cedis in terms of government bonds. And again, this is according to Finance Ministry's own data. That is just 0.6% of the entire share of the total security. So they are also there, and if you've checked, they have been meeting today. The Insurance Association have been meeting today. Everybody's trying to figure out how do we maneuver through this. And then you have SNIT. Your pensions go there. They also significantly have bought into government bonds as well. Not so much, but they still hold some. The key question then is the other pension funds. And that's why the workers have been complaining today. They've issued statements concerned that our pensions are at risk because their funds have called them and told them that, listen, maybe there's an issue here. How is government trying to deal with this when it comes to the concerns that workers have expressed? And then there's a big elephant in the room. What do you do with the external debt, the Eurobond market? If you check the data from the Finance Ministry, the first maturity when it comes to the external debt, we can expect that in 2025. The question to ask is, what is government's plan to deal with it? Because they will have to pay out $500 million or so at that time. And then the next one after that will be 2026. So whichever government is in power after the next elections is going to have a challenge here if government doesn't succeed in restructuring this part of it as well. Because there's $1.25 billion that will come for us to pay. If what we've heard already is anything to go by, the proposal to negotiate a 30% haircut for them on principal and interest, then that will knock off, at least the first one in 2025, some $158 million. But something you need to understand is, the alternative is even dire, even more dire than this. It's a case of you lending your money to somebody, and the person can either default, as in they can't pay you at all, or say to you, I want to pay you, but I can't pay you when I promised I will. So extend the time for me. I'll try and do some hopefully I can raise some additional funds. And then by that time, I can come back and pay you the money. I'm not going to pay you, with the interest that I promised. I'll pay you a bit less. You either accept that or you say, I won't. And the person can't pay you at all. You can go to the courts and sue him, which is your right, but you spend a lot of money. If it's a man of straw, even when you win the case, redeeming and making good that judgment will become an issue. Right? That is basically where we are with government debt as it is right now. So what is the best case out of here? Right? I mean, it is really a rock and a hard place. And government says, these are my offer. This is my offer on the table. It's voluntary. Please sign on to it and see if we can help the economy recover.